So we all know the United States excels at many things. But rather than list all those things off, I'm just going to put this chart on the screen of something that you probably knew, but you didn't really know until you saw it. That's right, in 2020, the US ranked second in terms of household debt as a percentage of GDP, falling behind or ahead of only Hong Kong. Now I can only imagine what's going on over in Hong Kong, but I know for us here in the US, we straight up don't know how to handle money. Plain and simple. But it's probably no help that the government continuously spends money that they hope to be able to collect years in the future. In fact, just in case you've never seen it before, there's an entire website dedicated to tracking the US national debt and the US household debt, and it's found at usdebtclock.org. I'm going to put a picture of the current statistics on the screen right now at the time of recording this, and I'm going to leave a link to that website down in the description below. It essentially just tracks a whole bunch of information about the US national debt and the US household debt, and it's fun to look at, so give it a look. So we all know that the US is going to continue to rack up that debt, so instead of worrying about that, let's focus on what we can control and take a look at US personal debt. Let's talk about a few ways to stay out of debt and get out of debt if we're already in it. And to start off with, let's have a few statistics. At the time of recording this, the average credit card debt per US citizen is $7,117. The average student loan debt per US student is $40,218. And the average total personal debt per US citizen is $71,687. And last but not least, we have the average savings per US family coming in at a whopping $9,875. It's clear that the US and its citizens have a propensity for debt. In fact, less than a quarter of all American households live debt-free. So let's talk about ways that we can tackle this debt and work towards a better life. If I woke up today and decided that I wanted to get rid of all of my debt, but I hadn't really been paying attention to how much I'm making or how much I'm spending, here are the steps that I would take. Step 1, I'm sure you can guess it, we have to assess the damage. If I have more than one type of debt, then I'm going to check each balance and figure out how much of each type of debt that I have and write them down. I'm also going to make note of the interest rate on each of those types of debt, and I'm going to write down the minimum payments that I have each month for those. The other half of this step is figuring out why we're actually in debt. Where's our money going each month? Where can we cut costs to hopefully plug the hole in our boat and stop the leak? And why have you not subscribed to the channel yet? Seriously, I have a bet with one of my friends that if I get 1,000 subscribers before the end of this year, then he has to get the same haircut as me. So if you could, go over to my channel and click the subscribe button so that the world can have one more bald person. So now that you've subscribed, which I really appreciate by the way, we're gonna go back to prioritizing getting out of debt, because the longer you wait, the harder it actually gets. So step 2 to this process is we have to assess our own capability. Once we know how much debt we have and where we can save money, we've got to figure out how much money we can throw at this debt each month to start chipping away at it. This isn't an easy step, and it usually takes a good bit of work because we need to know exactly how much money is coming in and going out every month. The easiest way to do this is to use some sort of personal finance tracking app like Mint.com or PersonalCapital.com. With this, you just connect all of your different accounts and cards to the app or website, and you let it track what you're doing for the next month or couple of months. I usually recommend doing a few months so that you can get some averages, but if you just want to do it for 1 month, assuming you have what you would call a typical month, then that should be okay to get an average from that. Just make sure that as you go throughout the month, you're checking in periodically with the app to make sure it's categorizing your transactions correctly, because from personal experience, I've noticed that sometimes it will put things in the wrong category. The other way to go about this is to create your own spreadsheet to track your cash flow every month manually. This route is a bit more involved and it takes a good deal of work on the front end because you have to list all of your different types of income and all of your expenses in a spreadsheet on your own. It also takes some ongoing maintenance because you have to input new information every week or month. But if you don't mind being a little bit more hands-on and proactive with your finances, then this is actually the best route. It allows you to create your own categories and track everything in a way that makes the most sense to you. And now we can move on to step number 3, which is to strategize. Once you have a good understanding of your inflows and outflows, here are a few different questions that you should consider. If there was absolutely no interest accruing on any of the debt that you have, how many months would it take you to pay off all of your balances in full using 100% of the leftover money that you have each month that you figured out from tracking how much you're spending? If your debt is fairly low and you think you might be able to pay it off in roughly a year, then there actually might be an opportunity for you to open a new credit card that's going to have a 0% APR for the first 12 to 15 months and transfer the balance over to that so that you get zero interest for the next 12 to 15 months. This is by no means the best option, and you have to be careful with this one, because sometimes there will be a balance transfer fee of somewhere around 3%, and if you happen to not pay off the full balance by the end of that intro APR period, the interest rate that it's going to renew at is probably way up there. Most credit cards for new account holders is going to have an APR somewhere in the mid 20% range, so if you don't pay off that full balance during that introductory APR period, then you better figure something out. The next question that you have to ask yourself is, are there other simple ways that I can reduce the amount of interest that I'm paying every month? If you have a bunch of credit card debt that's sitting around 23% interest, then this might mean consolidating all that debt into a personal loan that's only going to charge you 15% interest. If you have a good sized personal loan that's charging you 15% interest, but you have equity in your home, then this might mean opening a home equity line of credit at 10% and then transferring the balance over to that. If you're consistently getting hit with interest charges and late payment penalties because you can't seem to remember to pay off your credit card bill each month, then you just need to wake up and be a little bit more responsible, because there's no way around that. But if you've done all this already and you're ready to find out how to get rid of this debt once and for all, then you've got a decision to make in the next step. So as you probably guessed, step number 4 is figuring out which debt to pay off first. So we know how much debt we have, we know which types of debt we have, and we know our interest rates, and we know our minimum payments on all those types of debt. We also know how much money we have left over each month from all the savings that we did from cutting our costs so that we can use it to pay some of this debt down. Now all we have left to do is figure out which debt to attack first. So grab that list that you made and let's get to it. So generally there are 2 schools of thought whenever it comes to paying off debt. The first is called the snowball method, which is recommended by Dave Ramsey himself. And the second is called the avalanche method, which is recommended by this guy right here and practically everybody else that you hear of. Regardless of which option you choose, it takes discipline to pay off debt. You usually can't just make the monthly minimum payments and expect to ever get out of it. They call them minimum payments for a reason, and this terminology is used by credit card companies to hopefully squeeze you for more interest over the long term. So the 2 methods that I mentioned are pretty much only distinguished by which debt that they choose to allocate the money to first. For this example, we're going to assume that you're doing pretty well and you've got $1,000 left over each month to go towards your debt payment capability. And we're also going to assume that you've got the following credit types, balances, and interest rates. And I'm going to put them all in a little table for simplicity's purposes on the screen right now. So you can see here that we've got about $9,300 worth of credit card debt at a 23% interest rate and a minimum payment of $35, and then a personal loan with about $5,800 left on it at 12%, an auto loan at 15.8%, and a student loan at 28.1%. We've got a total of $59,000 worth of debt, and all of our minimum payments together adds up to about $670. So we have $330 left over that we can focus on paying one of these off with. So let's give Dave Ramsey a little respect and let's talk about the debt snowball first. This method assumes that you focus on paying off the debt with the lowest current balance. You make the minimum payments on all of your other types of debt and you throw everything additional into that lowest balance to hopefully get it eliminated, check one box off, and then move on to the next lowest balance. Obviously, this creates a sense of accomplishment and it helps you moving forward because it eliminates those minimum payments that you have so that you can throw additional money towards the next balance. I think this method is really good for people that are really driven by the small victories along the road to a bigger goal. It's not going to save you the most money on interest, but it is going to feel great to knock off one item off the list every so often. This method would obviously have you start with the personal loan, paying $330 extra towards that balance each month until it is paid off, and then you can move on to the credit card debt, the auto loan, and the student loans after. Now the other method, the debt avalanche, has you pay as much as you can towards the debt with the highest interest rate first, and then only make the minimum payments on all the other types of debt until you've eliminated that one. By doing this, statistically it's going to save you the most money on interest because you're eliminating the debt with the highest interest rate first and getting that out of the way. This is typically going to result in somebody paying off the credit card debt first because that's usually going to have the highest interest rate. In our example from the table, this method is going to have you pay the $330 extra towards the credit card balance first because it's got a 23% interest rate, and then you would move on to the personal loan, the student loan, and the auto loan last. Keep in mind that each line of credit that you eliminate frees up more cash to throw at the next line of credit. So hopefully you gain some momentum as you're going as well. Once you get to this point, the idea is just to stay the course and focus on just paying off the debt as quickly as you can, and then just trust the process as you go along. But as some additional thoughts, I should note that this whole debt conversation should be further divided into good debt and bad debt. In my opinion, not all debt should be paid off early, so here's some things to consider before you make a decision that's best for your current situation. If I'm in debt but I've got extra money left over each month, what am I really using that money for? If I plan on just letting the money stack up in my bank account, but I've already got a good emergency fund in place, then it might be better to pay off some debt because you're just losing money to inflation if you just leave it in the bank account. At least that way you save some money on interest. On the other hand, if I plan to invest that money, let's say into some index funds for the long term, do I expect that annualized return to be higher than the interest rate that I'm paying on my debt? If the answer to that question is yes, then odds are it's better to just invest that remaining balance and then pay off the debt over time, assuming that it's a good type of debt. A good general rule of thumb is if the interest rate on my debt is less than 5%, then I'm not really worried about paying it off early, especially if it's generating extra income for me. For instance, if you've got a loan on a rental property at, let's say, 4% and it's cash flow positive every month, then I would say you could probably find a better use for that money. If you can invest this money into something else, whether that be stocks, real estate, bonds, anything, and it earn you more than 4%, then it's better to invest it. Always remember that each person's situation is different, and you should always just focus on doing what's best for yourself. Sometimes the most efficient decision isn't the decision that's going to keep you the most happy. And if it's a close call, you'd be surprised how much your peace of mind is actually worth. But if your number one goal is to pay that debt off, then you really have to prioritize it. And things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. Set boundaries for your spending, set goals for your saving, and try to put you in a position to where you don't need to come back to this video for additional advice. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week.